Now we're going to see whether or not Russia's there, and if they're not, it'll be a very disappointing moment for the world.
Vladimir Putin just said no to the ceasefire deal, and right now Russians are turning against Putin for rejecting the offer. The Russian public is tired of this war. They want this war to end, and they want the Russian economy to serve the interests of Russian public, not the military. On top of this, President Trump today warned Putin. He said that if Russia does not accept the ceasefire deal, then there will be consequences that Putin can't even imagine. So let's talk about all this in today's video, starting with why Putin is unhappy with the ceasefire offer. So today, Putin held a press conference with President of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, and in the beginning of his speech, he said that this ceasefire deal is not President Trump's idea. In fact, it's a Ukrainian proposal, and Zelensky is begging the US to somehow pressure Russia to accept it. And that's why we have to be extra careful before accepting it, because that's something Ukraine wants. Take a listen.
The cessation should lead to peace and eliminate the root cause of the crisis. Now, regarding Ukraine's readiness to cease hostilities, you know about the US-Ukraine meeting in Saudi Arabia. Perhaps outwardly, it looks like a decision made by the Ukrainian side under American pressure. In fact, I am sure that the Ukrainian side must have asked the Americans for this.
Alright, now let's objectively break down everything that's happened over the last few weeks. So, first, Trump calls Zelensky a dictator. Then they somehow reach on a mineral deal. And a couple days later, Zelensky's invited to the White House, where we saw the whole falling out on national TV between Trump and Zelensky. And after this fight, President Trump decided to stop giving aid to Ukraine, pointing out that Zelensky is a dictator who doesn't want to end the war. Now, honestly, I don't know how anyone can look at all this and then come to a conclusion that Ukraine asked the US for a ceasefire favor and that the US granted it. That's just not true. If you look at Trump's speeches before he took office, he was saying that it was his goal to end the war, even if Ukraine has to give up some of its territory to Putin. So yeah, I think it's pretty moronic of Vladimir Putin to say that the ceasefire agreement was not a US proposal, but rather something Ukraine asked for. And let's be real, we all know what's going on here. Deep down, Putin himself knows that what he's saying is not true, so he's just playing with his words to somehow get out of the situation. He wants to say no to the ceasefire deal, but at the same time, he does not want to piss off President Trump. So instead of rejecting the ceasefire offer outright, he's coming up with excuses. So after this opening statement, Putin starts to add his own conditions to the ceasefire proposal that the Trump administration presented him. Basically, what he's saying is, yeah, I'm good with this proposal, but if you just change it completely and add my conditions too, then I'll agree with it even more. Take a listen to this.
We are in favor, but there are nuances. What are they? First, what are we going to do with this section of the wedge in the Kursk region? If we cease hostilities for 30 days, what does that mean? Will everyone in there leave without a fight? Are we supposed to let them out after they have committed massive crimes against civilians? Or will the Ukrainian leadership give us the command to lay down our arms, to just surrender? How will it be? It is unclear. How will other issues be addressed across the entire line of contact? And that is almost 2,000 kilometers. As you know, Russian troops are advancing in almost all areas of the contact. Conditions are being created for us to blockade entire, fairly large units. So, what will these 30 days be used for? Will Ukraine continue this forced mobilization? Will they supply weapons there? Will newly mobilized units be trained? Or will none of this happen? The question then arises, what will it be? How will verification controls be handled? How can we ensure that nothing like this will happen?
And after saying this, Putin's tongue slips and he accidentally goes on to say what he really meant. He said he wants Zelensky to surrender to him and he wants the entire Ukraine to surrender to Russia. And he also does not want Ukraine to exist as an independent country. And finally, he straight up admits that he does not want a ceasefire deal because the Russian forces have trapped Ukrainian soldiers in Kursk. So if he agrees to a ceasefire deal right now, those Ukrainian soldiers get to walk away for free. Now, This statement sounds exactly like what he said at the beginning of the war, that the Russian troops will take over Kiev in 3 days. He called it his special 3-day military operation, the same 3-day special military operation that's still dragging on to this day. Now, the reality is that Russian troops were failing badly in Kursk. They made very little territorial gains ever since the operation started. So it's kind of funny hearing Putin saying that Russian troops have trapped Ukrainian forces in Kursk. In fact, now it's Ukrainian military that's pulling back. And now, I know some of you guys would be wondering, why are Ukrainian troops pulling back if Russian forces are not gaining ground? Well, remember when the US suspended its intelligence sharing with Ukraine? They specifically cut off intelligence sharing relating to any offensive operations that Ukraine was doing. We had Steve Witkoff say this on live TV that the United States has halted intelligence sharing that covers the Kursk region because Ukrainian forces are doing an offensive operation in that region. So Ukraine had to make a strategic decision here. They had to ask themselves, was it worth risking Ukrainian lives to hold onto a territory that might not even be useful in negotiations? Because after the Oval Office fiasco between Trump and Zelensky, Ukrainians believed that the Trump administration was not going to help them trade the Kursk region with Ukrainian territory that Russia controls. So President Zelensky decided not to risk Ukrainian lives for a piece of land that's not even going to help them in negotiations. And that's why Ukrainian troops started pulling back. Now, Putin is using the whole situation to say, hey, look, Russian troops are making gains in Kursk, when in reality, it's a straight lie. In fact, when Ukrainian troops announced they're pulling back, it was a total surprise for Putin. He was so happy that he actually went to Kursk and he did a whole photo op with Russian soldiers, like it was some kind of victory. Okay, now I'm going to play a video of General Jack Keane explaining this whole situation much better than I can. Take a listen.
So Russia says no to the ceasefire offer. They want to recapture the area I just described over there. Where are we now?
Well, first, I do think they'll recapture that area. As you indicated, think of this. No one has occupied Russian territory since Hitler and the Germans in World War II. They've occupied this territory for 6 months. They brought in North Koreans, 10,000 plus strong, to retake that territory, and it took all of this time. That's why if you put up last year's map of that area in red right there, it would look relatively the same. They made some marginal tactical gains, but what they really wanted to do is make operational gains to take them all the way down into Odessa, capture Odessa, and go further into Ukraine to the west than what you see on that map. None of that has been accomplished. Russia has a lot more challenges than their narrative would suggest. Their narrative is we're on the offense, Ukraine's on the defense, therefore they're losing. Not surprised that they push back on the ceasefire. I'm not convinced yet that Russia is serious about making major concessions and willing to compromise to get to a peace agreement. I think that really remains to be seen.
Luckily, right after Putin's little stunt, Trump held a press conference with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. And right there in that press conference, he got asked about Putin's comments. And what he said in response was quite a warning for Putin. Take a listen.
Well, we'd like to see a ceasefire from Russia. And we have not been working in the dark. We've been discussing with Ukraine land and pieces of land that would be kept and lost and all of the other elements of a final agreement. There's a power plant involved, a very big power plant involved. Who's going to get the power plant and who's going to get this and that? And so, it's not an easy process. But phase one is the ceasefire. A lot of the individual subjects have been discussed, though. We've been discussing concepts of land because you don't want to waste time with a ceasefire if it's not going to mean anything. So we're saying, look, this is what you can get, this is what you can't get. They discussed NATO and being in NATO, and everybody knows what the answer to that is. They've known that answer for 40 years, in all fairness. So a lot of the details of a final agreement have actually been discussed. Now we're going to see whether or not Russia's there, and if they're not, it'll be a very disappointing moment for the world.
Now, hopefully, Trump will back up this warning with actions, because we know when Zelensky didn't seem to be on board with the peace deal, he cut off all aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. Now, this time, it's Putin who's stalling the ceasefire. So the logical move here should be to crank up support for Ukraine, give them more aid, More weapons so they can once again start putting pressure on the Russian military on the front lines. This way, Putin will come to the negotiation table a lot quicker. Here we have a member from Putin's cabinet basically saying that Putin will never agree to a 30-day ceasefire deal because it would just give Ukrainian forces time to regroup and rearm. He also said that a temporary ceasefire would only favor Ukraine. And apparently, every Russian news channel that's connected to Kremlin, they're all saying the same thing, that Russia is winning on the front lines. Why would they want to do a ceasefire now? Which is pretty funny because conveniently they're ignoring the fact that Moscow just got hit with the largest attack ever since the war started, and Ukraine pulled it off without any US intelligence. And this right here proves that Ukraine has more than enough capability to keep hurting Russia. Now take a listen to what Putin's fed Russia media is saying on the ceasefire deal.
We are now smashing their faces, and then we say, now let's have a pause so they can pump you with weapons and intelligence so that in 30 days you can hold us back or something. Well, I can say more. Now, Witkoff, I want to note that they signed it. Do you understand? They finished the press conference and stated that. One thing is clear. They figuratively signed it. Yes. Yes. What they are saying now, and what's important, is that Ukraine forced America to go back to supplying it with weapons and intelligence data, which, judging by the strike on Moscow, it never stopped doing. Therefore, one thing is clear here. Our tasks are set by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, and we will fulfill them. We are deeply indifferent to what these people have agreed upon. And for those who thought that Trump will come, and everything would be fine for us. Number, not fine. But this, by the way, don't lose your minds. In fact, this is already a failure of the peace plan. Russia has only two allies, the Army and the Navy, and our secret trump card is the Strategic Missile Forces. Therefore, we are calmly and systematically solving the tasks set by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. Well, by the way, let me remind you that all this has no meaning at all. This is just the beginning of a long negotiation process.
Okay, I missed this video before, but here we have an interview clip of President Trump. He gave an interview in which the journalist asked, "What's the plan if Putin doesn't agree to a ceasefire?" Listen to what he said in response.
Are you speaking to Putin in the last days or hours personally?
Well, I don't want to say it, but we are dealing with him, and I think it's going reasonably well. It's a very complex situation. You know, it's a bloody, terrible war, and I do think it's going well. As you know, we have a ceasefire agreement with the Ukrainian group, and we are trying to get that with Russia too. And I think thus far it's gone okay. We'll know a little bit more on Monday, and that'll be hopefully good.
I'm not understating the complexity of all this, but as a candidate, you said you would have this war settled in 24 hours.
Well, I was being a little bit sarcastic when I said that. I would. What I really mean is I'd like to get it settled, and I think I'll be successful.
What's the plan if Putin doesn't agree to a ceasefire?
Bad news for this world because so many people are dying. But I think he's going to agree. I really do. I think I know him pretty well, and I think he's going to agree.
Okay, now I'm going to play some clips of Ukraine's recent attack inside Moscow. And remember, they did all this damage without any US support. Watch this.
Сейчас как будто больше стало, блядь.
Anyways, the UK's Prime Minister was asked point blank by a reporter, what are his plans if Trump sides with Putin? Watch this.
Perhaps even a likely scenario where Vladimir Putin doesn't come to his senses, where he continues putting unreasonable demands on any ceasefire, on any negotiated settlement, perhaps doesn't even come to the table at all. And in that scenario, we can't be certain that Donald Trump is going to side with us and not with him. What's plan B?
Well, firstly, we need to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position for whatever comes next, which has been my consistent position, whether that's around the table, which is what I hope it will be in negotiations, or if that doesn't come to pass. Secondly, on the US, and Caroline, I'm sorry, you also asked me about the US. We are obviously talking to the US every day about what happens next. I am clear in my own mind that President Trump is absolutely committed to the lasting peace that is needed in Ukraine, and everything he's doing is geared towards that end. I'm also absolutely clear that